Have you ever had the experience where later on in life you realize that certain things in your life were really connected? Well, this came up for me as I was preparing for this speech. One of the things about me is when I was young, I thought I was really, really shy. I mean, I couldn't talk on the phone to anyone if I didn't know them well. I didn't make small talk. I didn't carry on conversations. I didn't really have friends. Part of that may have been because the area where we grew up, there weren't a lot of people, kids my age, but still, even when we had more access, I still didn't make friends easily. Later on, I realized that it wasn't so much that I was shy, it was I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to approach someone and start a conversation. So I studied it. I watched people who did it well. And it was simple. You just notice somebody about some person, you notice something about them, and you comment on it. If they have a shirt, it's NASCAR, oh, where'd you get that shirt? Did you go to that race? And so I used that, and it worked pretty well. Later on, as I practiced some more, that became even easier. Now, you know, if I go into a store and there's a long line, it's like, boy, you guys are really slammed today. Or something about the situation that is some commonality. I'm beginning to do that with kind of building relationships, but that's still a little bit of a struggle for me. So the second thing about me is I like to learn. I studied it. I figured it out. And that has really helped in a lot of different ways for me socially. The third thing about me is I like to teach. And I worked for a while in a program for kids with behavior problems, and I got to teach sometimes. I was hired as an instructional aide, but I also was asked to develop a curriculum for U.S. government, and so I got to come up with plans for how to teach kids with behavior problems, something that's probably one of the most boring classes that most people take in school. And they had fun, they enjoyed it, and they remembered what they had learned. So later, several jobs later, I worked as a counselor for vocational rehabilitation. And I don't know if anyone knows about vocational rehabilitation, but they help people who have disabilities, any sort of disability, to get and keep jobs. It can be a physical disability, it can be a mental health disability, it can be a developmental disability. And I had one customer who had really struggled with keeping jobs. And when we were talking about it, one of the things that she said was, they said I just don't get along with people. And I said, well, tell me a little bit more about that. Well, I don't understand why when I go into work and somebody asks how I am, they don't really want to know. And that's when I got to do the teaching. I said, well, it's not that that they don't want to know, it's that that's not the purpose of that communication. That communication is kind of like a recognition signal. Kind of like when you send a fax and the machines have to make sure that they're talking. it's whenever you have people in contact with one another, there has to be some sort of lubricant for those relationships. You have to have something that lets somebody say, oh, I recognize you. Do you recognize me? Yeah, okay, you know, and you go on with your day. But it doesn't mean that they want a whole story about your medical history or anything like that. You know, what happened last night, you know, the argument you had with your boyfriend. That's not it. And I saw the light bulb go on. And it was like this palpable sense of relief that she's like, I get it. That's all they mean. That's all it means? I'm like, yeah, that's all it is. Well, I can do that. And as I prepared for this speech, I studied a little bit more about that sort of small talk. And it actually has a name. It's called phatic communication. So I'm going to leave you with a question. Not emphatic communication. I recognize you. You recognize me?